So now that you've created a form in the previous videos, you're going to want to go ahead and adjust those settings. The settings are super important before you start sending out and collecting those responses. So that way you're getting what you want and that users can access it. So the first thing that I want to cover is collecting email addresses. Inside of collecting email addresses and you're sending those forms, if you have this check mark selected where it's automatically collecting respondents in Cheney School District email address, only individuals who have a Cheney School District email address will be able to access your form and fill it out. We've experienced this a lot when we have documents and forms that are sent out for PD or other things where you have to be logged into your Cheney School District account. So if you're logged into a personal account, you can't access it. If you want to be sending this to parents, they don't have a Cheney School District account. So you want to make sure that this is not checked. It'd be really great if this could occur to collect email addresses all the time, but when you're collecting an email address using this checkmark option, you're actually requiring the user to sign into Google before they complete the form. You can still collect email addresses by just asking a question, what is your email address? And people can respond to that if you're really looking for email addresses and you want to send this out to everybody. But it's really important that if you are wanting email addresses collected, that you understand what's checked. It's also important that when you're collecting those email addresses, you do have the option of sending a recipient to the response or a response to the recipient. So let's say you want students to view their answers to a quiz and you want to send it via email. You can have it automatically send their responses and what they answered on the quiz to them in their email by using this check mark. And every one of our students is using their school district account anyway, so you can definitely collect email addresses from students because it's by default. Then you also have the additional option of requiring a sign-in and restricting to just our district and limiting responses to one response. Again, if you want to be limiting responses, you have to have people sign in, and that makes it a little bit more complicated. So it's better if you just kind of trust it and collect responses if you're like wanting people outside of our domain, like parents, to be answering, and you can filter through those responses if they respond multiple times. But you definitely don't want to close off parents from being able to respond by collecting those email addresses and them not having any. So let's go ahead and look at where this is at inside Google Forms. So when I'm in Google Forms for my practice form, in my settings up here, I have these options. And I can choose to collect those email addresses, restrict users to my domain, or limit that response. And that's inside of your general settings. You'll see that when you check this, you then get the option to do response recipients, where again, if I hover over this little icon, it says respondents receive a copy in their email. I can uncheck that and I can uncheck this, and that would be able to allow everyone to be able to answer it, whether they're in our domain or not, and it doesn't require them to sign in, which really is just a lot easier for people to do. When you click limit to one response, you'll see that by default, they'll be required to sign in because that's how Google is going to track whether or not they've done it before. So when you're limiting to one response, they have to have a Google login. It doesn't necessarily need to be in our domain of Cheney School District, but they will have to have a Google email. And if they don't, that makes it a little bit more complicated. So if you're wanting the easiest type of form that everyone can fill out, no matter how they're signed in, you can uncheck all of these. And that would mean that anyone could fill out your form as long as they have the link. Then you have options of what they can do after they're done with their form. Do you want them to edit after they submit or see a summary of charts of text responses so they can see other people's responses? You have those options automatically. When you get to the end of the form, which I'm going to show you the end of my form right now, you can see it says your response has been recorded, submit another response. It doesn't give me the option to edit my response because I don't have that check mark checked and I can't see a summary of charts and text responses. But if I wanted students to be able to go back and edit the feedback that they gave or the answers that they gave, I could check this, or I can see a summary of charts and text responses. Once they leave that last page, though, it doesn't really give them the option to go back and edit it again. So make sure that you are, your students are fully understanding what they want to do. Sometimes it's just better to create a brand new form. Then we have presentation. Presentation is where you can adjust what it looks like as the students and parents are going through it. So you can see show link to submit another response is checked, which is why when I'm looking at the end of my form, I can submit another response, taking me back to the beginning of the form, which I suggest turning off if you only want one per person, because then they're not opting to go and do it again. Then you have an option to shuffle the question order if you want the questions to be mixed up. You can't choose which questions get mixed up though. You either want all of them to mix up or not, so just keep that in mind. And then you can show a progress bar at the bottom, which would show generally in the bottom left saying how far through percentage-wise they are through the form, especially if you have multiple sections and they don't know how many more questions are left. Lastly, at the end of it, it says your response has been recorded. You can change this. You can say like, thank you so much for checking in with me today. I'm excited to learn with you. And that can be what they see at the end of it. You'll want to make sure you hit save at the end of that, so that way you save that response. And I can uncheck this so that response option goes away. So now if I go through my practice form and I answer the questions, you'll be able to see at the end of my form that the response has changed at the end and they can't submit another response. So you can see now it says what I wrote and I can't submit another response. And those are inside of your settings for your form up in this little gear icon. The last thing that's in this gear icon is turning this into a quiz. And we'll get deeper into quiz if you want to go into harnessing the power of Google Forms. We talk about how to make them into quizzes, but these are really great to make it so you can assign point values to questions as well as auto grading and selecting which ones are correct or not. So you can do that inside of here, and you can see here that it gives options to like so immediately release the grades after manual review, showing whether or not they missed questions, what the correct answers are, point values, all those kinds of things. It's a really great feature. But if you've already got a quiz or like a form that's created that's like a quiz, you can hit this check mark or hit this option and it'll turn it into a quiz. So let's go ahead and save that. And the other features that you have for your settings are your theme. So right here, you've got a little palette icon, and we've seen this in Google Classroom and other things. And I can click the palette icon and adjust my theme. I can add a header image if I want to. I can even choose out of the options like they normally have inside of Google, where I can choose what they have available to me. I can upload my own or grab some from my Google Drive. So as I adjust that, it will actually let you pick off of those colors roughly. So it's going to put that up at the header, up at the top. And if I go to questions, you'll be able to see it. So there's my header. Notice my theme color automatically adjusts to the colors inside this image. So if you don't like the colors inside that image, you can add a new one. And I can adjust what they look like and so on and so forth. You also have the option of doing different font styles. So if you want to, you can choose things like having a little bit more of a serif font and those kinds of things with a formal style. All that is available inside of your theme options as well. So now if we preview our form again, you'll see that it's adjusted to look how I want it to be with my theme, colors, font, as well as my header image once it loads while I sit here talking. You'd think being at the school, I'd have higher, faster internet, but it's loading really slow. So you can see here, all of things has updated. Awesome. And that is how you can adjust the settings of a Google form.